this was the project leader is University of Latvia and Sanita Reinsone. And the project started right before the pandemic, so that the first the first idea of the project was not around any special or circumstances or lockdowns or anything like that. It was just to form a network of Nordic and Baltic life writing scholars, and to also try to find ways of also cooperating in the future. And after so many changes and so much time, this is the first time that we meet, and I think it's very suitable that we meet around this topic of pandemic life writing. That is also really important thing to research, and it is lovely to see so many presentations here, but I think that others feel like me, that we feel that it's enough already. We'd like to return to our normal lives, and we don't know when it can happen. So it's a pity that we can't meet in person today. But my name is Leena Kurvet-Käosaar, and I work at University of Tartu at the Institute of Cultural Research, and I teach different courses relating to literary and cultural theory. But I think that as a scholar, I define myself as a life writing scholar, and I've been engaged in different kinds of life writing research, but also collecting life writing. And more recently, I teach creative nonfiction. I teach for, I think, third year life writing course at Tartu University, where students write their life stories under my supervision. And so this is basically what I do and what I'm most interested in, yes. And about pandemic life writing initiatives and results, I will talk a bit later in my presentation. But I will give floor now to Sanita to say a few words about the project. Yes, please.
Thank you, Leena. Hello, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to see so many faces despite behind the screen. Indeed, this project was written some 2 years, not 2 years, about 1.5 years ago, and we expected that we can meet in person, and of course we didn't expect that the first topic we will be discussed will be something like pandemic, because it wasn't at that time topical at all. But yeah, after several amendments and figuring out how to deal with this project and how to get along, we decided to organize 3 workshops this spring, and this is the first one about pandemics. The next one will be in 3 weeks, approximately in the middle of May, and we will discuss what life writing is archived in general, and what are the ways to do it, and what are the collections. The focus is on the Nordic and Baltic region because of the the funding comes from the Nordic Culture Point, but I think we are interested in more global experiences as well. And the topic of the 3rd workshop that will take place in June, in the beginning of June, it's still under discussions. And if you have some good ideas, you're welcome to write on comments. Yeah, that's it from me now. Let's start and yeah, have a pleasant workshop and good discussions.
Thank you, Sanita, and let me see if I can now put on my, can you see now I wonder if you can see my PowerPoint that should say collecting pandemic life writing in Estonia or not?
No.
No, okay. Let me try to share the screen again. Now I put stop share and again share screen and what about now?
Yes.
Okay, now I managed to. I think I mixed up the order of some slides, but I will start anyway. Okay, so I will speak about collecting pandemic life writing in Estonia. And the collection of pandemic life writing, or actually I'm going to talk mostly about not pandemic life writing as such, but the period of lockdown from last spring, when this first collection initiative was started. That was also the most productive so far. So you can see here on the slide the public calls that Estonian Literary Museum and Association of Estonian Life Stories has issued. And the first one went out in March, 18th of March last year. So that was only a few days after lockdown was declared in Estonia, and it was kind of reissued in August last year. And the last call that is active right now, it was issued in February this year. And maybe Maarja can later say some words about it, but it hasn't, unfortunately, yielded very many kind of life stories or memoirs so far. But the first call was special in the sense that we did not ask for any kind of reflections, although those were also welcome, but we specifically asked people to keep a diary. And some of the things that we asked people to record was changes in everyday life, then relationships with family and friends, how these have been changed, and if these have been changed, and fears and hopes, and a few more things. Why what motivated this collection? First of all, of course, it was a wish to add to the life story archive of the life story collection of Estonian Cultural Archive that right now has a life story archive that has roughly 4,000 archival units. So it was adding to the already existing very nice life story archive and the purpose was preservation and collection of historical and cultural memory. But it was not just like a project that was geared toward preservation and collection of historical and cultural memory. It was also, we thought that during this time, diary keeping might be something that would be helpful, also like offer some kind of support for people to handle this situation. It was based on a kind of understanding of diary keeping is, recording, a means of recording everyday life that enables self-analysis, self-scrutiny. It makes possible this description, not only description or recording of historical events and social change, but also it enables one to reflect on that, and that the diary keeping is an effective means of coping because it enables to structure life experience, to reflect on it, and to, this is a word that is very often used nowadays also in the field of life writing studies. It is a means of storing life experience, and while we are dealing, engaged in this process of storing, of narrating, storing is actually a wider concept than that this itself helps, it creates some kind of order in our life experience. And diaries is especially helpful in the sense because it enables the author to story his or her life experience via micro narratives. So these are narratives that are somehow very they're very easy, or you come to these micro narratives very easily, and it's much easier to record them. It doesn't take so much effort. And in my previous research, for example, I have looked at diaries that were written during deportations, as the Stalinist deportations, when people, for the authors, definitely diary keeping was a means of coping, and also for them a means of staying alive. So we were thinking that maybe this diary keeping would offer something of that kind of support. And it was really a really wonderful surprise that so many that we received so many diaries. So altogether 63 diaries plus this group diary that I started with my creative nonfiction class when the lockdown started. We, as an university teacher, I had to rearrange everything very quickly, and university was rather on the demanding side, said like get everything done, establish new requirements for the students and so on. And I was confused, and I was thinking, you know, my students might be as well, and especially for this creative nonfiction class, it seemed very appropriate to have this task that was not a mandatory but voluntary task. I proposed, let's keep a diary for a week, let's do it together, and this kind of students liked it, and it was a very good thing, and we kept the diary together for the whole month almost, and it is also in them now in the museum, this diary. But also then in addition to these 5 memoirs and 8 short memoirs by students. And if you look at the, who is the authorship, then 70% are women's diaries. And the age groups, women in their 30s and also women in their 60s, they are represented well, but also men in their 30s. And there are quite a few diaries by school students. And the reason is that we also approached schools, or when we advertised this call, we said that this is something that could be very well used in schools, and several teachers also took up on that and sent the results to us later. And you can see on the slide that the diaries look very different, and these are the more maybe interesting diaries. Some are completely visual diaries, some are semi-visual diaries, and then on the very left you can see that one woman who lives in France, an Estonian woman, that she this is a self-published book. So the topics, on the slide you can see a list of the topics that emerge in the diary. I can say that maybe diary keeping does not emerge as a very important topic in the diary, but this is something that was of interest for us to see if people reflected on whether this was helpful or not. And especially when I have more recently kind of reread the diaries, then it kind of keeps popping up that people really felt that it was of help. But then, of course, people reflected on changes in everyday life and coping with that, then work also, frontline, but it is still, this is that, how to say, group of authors that is hardly present also now in what we have, and also, learning, education, questions, different kinds, also fears and dangers, then problems, then also to a lesser extent people wrote about what they think about how lockdown was handled by national and local government institutions, whether they had support or whether there was lack of support, and also then changes in the world and changing world. And these categories I'll try to explain later that they are not exactly the same. Okay, so changes in the world is how people perceive, how the world is changed now. So mostly it was perceived that this is a catastrophic kind of change. Several authors compared this change to wars or apocalyptic change, and there was like a link that this physical existence, these limitations in physical existence, that they have a strong psychological impact, but also people talked about economic impact and increased responsibilities. And here's a quote by one woman. She writes like this: I remember an autobiographical book for children by Ilon Wickland titled A Long, Long Journey, where during World War II, the child protagonist each morning rushed to see if the world was still there. Figuratively speaking, I also check if the world is still there. It is, but the situation is getting scarier with each day. And I'd like to remind that, at that time, Estonia has very, very low infection rates, and this real danger was almost non-existent. And a month or a little more than a month ago, Estonia was, if you look at the infection rates, #1 country in the world. And it would be really interesting to see how people look at the situation when statistically, at least, there is really grave danger to their well-being. And this is illustration from visual or graphic diary by a junior high school student. And it says the end with a question mark, but it is humorous in the sense that he writes this, the end is not, it's not in an apocalyptic sense, but he hopes that this task of keeping the diary, that it will end with this day. But the teacher, alas, asked the students to keep diary a few more weeks. Yeah. Okay, but as for diary keeping, then some authors even they reprimanded the literary museum for even issuing this. Like, for example, one man in his early 30s writes that this is a stupid command, or that it's the command of the stupid literary museum, and that writing a diary for an external user is a dumb undertaking by all means. And he's one of the few authors who also talks about mental health problems. And then later in his diary, he admits that this diary keeping has calming effect on her, and it helps him to kind of handle the situation, while he has no access or very limited access to a psychiatrist or psychologist. So he has no, this medical help that he actually needs. And then another woman who is a young university instructor, she says that on some evenings, the only thing that she could do was writing, that this creative activity for which there was no pressure, that was the only thing that she could do, that she couldn't do much else, and then diary keeping helped. I have created a little chart here where the changes in everyday life, they have marked on the left. You can see the changes that were marked negatively, and on the right you can see changes that were felt as positive changes. And if you look at these points on the left and on the right hand side columns, you can see that they overlap, that partially they overlap. So, for example, in the category of movement, that there was this limited movement, limited possibilities or non-existent possibilities for entertainment, hobbies, sports, and socializing. At the same time, there were more possibilities for movement. There was, and most importantly, more possibilities for and more time for spending time in nature. Sorry, there's a typo on the slide also. And then also home office or distance learning. Distance learning is marked more negatively. It caused more problems than was found to be, something exciting or something positive. But reaction to home office was dual, that people missed the routine of going to work, but also, especially women, write about that it is nice to be able to combine chores and to win a lot of time if you don't need to commute anymore. And then also women complained about the increased housework load, and also there was the problematic, access to consumer goods, food, and healthcare. But it was not something that came up in the diaries very often. And this limited socializations, on the other hand, some people wrote that they have now more time to socialize with their family members. And I think it's important to point out that especially children wrote about this, that they really enjoyed that they spend time with their family, and they can do things with it. They can play games, and they can go for walks, and they can have long talks. So these are mostly this middle school or junior high, like 7th grade, 6th grades, let's say, children who wrote about that. And then also some people said that now they have time for hobby activities like cooking or handicrafts, or doing stuff with their kids, these kinds of like handicraft projects that they didn't have time before. So so that the negative and positive list, it doesn't category-wise differ radically. And it's really important that or interesting that loss of employment or changes in work life, this was something that a lot of people wrote about, but they did not write about this in negative sense. They even if they said that I'm now unemployed and my income has decreased radically, they were not so unhappy about it. They enjoyed this time, to stop and reflect a little bit and think, what they want to change with their life. So it was not lamented as a catastrophic change in their life. Of course, probably people for whom it was catastrophic change did not try it. And then I was hoping to have more in those diaries about these ways of coping with everyday life. And on the screen you can see a humorous illustrations from one of the diaries, and the diary is also like a hobby cartoonist, and this is about how you deliver packages nowadays. This was during the lockdown, so now we are all gotten so used to things like this that we don't even pay attention to that. But for example, a lady in her, I think, 60s wrote how her grandchild, who was studying for an anthropology degree in Oxford, he was doing field work in Burma, and because of the time difference with Estonia, he was able to take care of the family's grocery shopping when it went online. And so she was very proud that he was doing grocery shopping for their whole family and kept the family safe, so they didn't need to go outside to shop. But people didn't write about that very much, so I don't know if it wasn't the problem as such, or it wasn't considered important enough to write about this everyday thing. So as far as school education, also university and school is concerned, then the topics that came up was lack of motivation and boredom, and also technical problems. And if you think of what school children wrote, that they didn't really celebrate this long distance learning, or that they couldn't go to school. So one boy writes that, I'm somehow in low mood, I'd rather be in school. I chat in Discord, and my friends also note that they must be crazy since they want to go to school. And then a special category is parents as support. And some parents wrote about that it was positive that they could now be engaged in the learning process, that they were also in the role of educators. But a much bigger problem for parents was this rapid increase of responsibilities, and managing to motivate children to study, and this handling schoolwork arrangement and handling low effectivity. And to this day, again, we don't have really these diaries or other kinds of records, life writing records that talk about these problems. But as a mother of kind of two young children, of whom one goes to school, then I was part of different support groups on Facebook, and these questions popped up very often, and I'm trying to get the parents, mostly mothers, in one of the support groups to write maybe even a joint record of their experience. But because they are so overwhelmed, it's really difficult to achieve, for them to also mediate their experience. So the next point is about fears, what people feared. Then if you look at the diaries from the lockdown period, when the people knew very little about COVID, and there were a lot of fears, but then the fears made people's lives really uncomfortable. But they were not there were fears but not real risks. And now, of course, there were a lot more real risk, but also perhaps less fears. And it would be again very important and interesting to see how people react now. But in terms of fears, it is important to see, or it's interesting to see what are they based on. For example, with those lockdown diaries, you could kind of differentiate between indirect fears, that what people heard from the news, and also what rumors there were, and often news and rumors also intermingled into each other. So I think these materials, would offer good possibilities for doing a separate research on this perception of and interpretation of information. And then direct fears, that was fear of infection, but at that time then it was unclear what people feared. Even they said maybe I get infected, but they did not write about, you know, duration and impact of the virus, something that is now much more well known, and there are more people with different kinds of experience of the virus. But then there is like this on the slide, there is a slightly humorous example. A woman writes, I'm doing laundry and I take laundry to dry outside. Is it safe? If someone infected with corona sneezes at my laundry, will I get the infection? And there are other kinds of humorous. And then there's another woman who writes about something that she has kind of heard or that has been written in the newspaper, that the virus spread especially like actively in on the island of Saaremaa in the spring. And then Kuressaare is the capital of the island of Saaremaa, and then they considered if they should start disinfecting the streets to stop the spread of the virus. Yeah. And then as far as state and local support is concerned, then there is no one who would you know, say in their diary or memoirs that they don't agree with the need for lockdown. That on the contrary, people say that it was so good that this lockdown was declared, that now it makes us a lot safer. And also some people say that it's really nice if, for example, if the Minister of Social Affairs has posted some notices for like support and advice for parents. And one mother says that already reading this advice, just, you know, knowing that it's out there is very calming for me. But also some people are frustrated by the commands. And then on the slide, you can see on the right-hand corner, you can see that Tartu issued a social, kind of like a scary social campaign. For example, you can see on the poster, there is this sculpture that is in the Tartu town hall, that is a man and a woman hugging each other and kissing, and you can see that there is a gravestone instead of the woman, and it's the same with the sculpture on the left, that there are two men, a boy and a man is missing. There is a gravestone, and people were very annoyed of this kind of this social media campaign, said that they were already kind of nervous and feared what was going to happen, and now they even, you know, they felt even, you know, more badly about that. And when the situation really was much more serious now, kind of like a few months ago or a month ago, then there was no campaign as such in Tartu. So the city of Tartu did not issue a new campaign when it would have been maybe more like justified. But all in all, social isolation was the problem that was mentioned most of all in the diaries. So you have on the screen two examples, and one, I think they're both, they show how the authors are in very low mood and how they have this pessimistic outlook on the present. And this is something that we have very few records kind of that have been sent to the museum, or that have been sent to me also after this first lockdown period. But the few records that I have, then there is this definitely something that has changed, is that the outlook is not only pessimistic concerning the present, it's much more pessimistic concerning the future. And at that time, it was only the present that people concentrated on, and that they did not see so brightly. But some people, for example, the first example here, they state quite openly that they fear that they are kind of that depression is taking over, or that their lives are crumbling. But also, when people wrote about social isolation problems, they did not only wrote about, you know, being isolated and suffering from that. They also wrote about ways of handling that, like Skype parties and reading fiction, for example, to elderly relatives, kind of on the phone every day. And also one woman even wrote about, these window displays that were more popular in the countries where you had, total lockdown, people could not move at all. And so they communicated by making those window displays. And, this comes up in a few diaries as well. But social isolation as a problem, I think it's more common than, it is like, if you could ask me that what is the biggest problem that people see they have in their lives, I would say that this is social isolation, and it comes in many forms. It is related to different things, but this is the biggest problem of all. And here I think I'm going to end here. As I said, we have some records, very few records that are about the current situation, and the outlook on life has gotten gloomier. There is less hope for a positive change in the world, because in the first kind of batch of records or diaries, some people were really hopeful. They said that this is really something that it's a welcome change in the world. The health of the planet will get better. Perhaps we will stop living in this consumer culture dominated world, and maybe people they have now time. We live now a slower life, and you have less possibility for self-reflection, and maybe we emerge from this kind of life and we are different and we live different lives. And then the records that we have that reflect on how is the life now. Then one man who wrote very like a detailed diary in his Facebook post, he says, I was of really optimistic and positive disposition back then. Today it's very hard to see that cooperation, caring, and the birth of a new world that I described back then. Rather, one sees fatigue and bitterness, anger, and even evil. And another diarist also, she wrote a very detailed and very humorous, witty diary, and she reflects in how she has sent some further portions of her diary, and she noted around the New Year, or on New Year's Day, I think, she writes, throughout the world people cry out for help through these joking memes celebrating surviving the year, and it is unlikely that anyone really believes that this horror will go away all of a sudden. So there's a sense that it's not, that there's less reason to take this, as a kind of welcome, kind of mock catastrophic situation. It really is, the problems are perceived to be much graver. And I really hope that we'll get more records of this, this kind of semi-lockdown, or this, the last period when the infection rates in Estonia were very high, and it will be more varied, and that finally we get maybe some frontline people also to write about their experience, especially medical staff. But so far we are still looking forward to receiving them. Thank you very much. And so okay, what do we do now? Shall we go on with the next presentation?
I would suggest so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I would like to give the floor now to Marja-Leena Jalava, who is from Finnish Literature Society. And I would like all, like the other presenters, to maybe also say a few words about themselves, yeah? But so welcome, Marja-Leena.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Marja-Leena, and I work as a senior archivist in the Finnish Literature Society in the collection of traditional and contemporary culture. Working with collection campaigns is part of my job that I really enjoy the most. And what I'm going to talk about today is the collection campaign we did on pandemic last year. I'm going to talk about how we organized the Koronakevät, the Corona Spring campaign, and what the actual outcome was. And I must say that we had very similar observations as you did, Leena. But at first I'm going to just shortly tell about our organization for those who don't know us. The Finnish Literature Society has a long history of documenting everyday life. The organization was founded in 1831 and publishing folk poetry were its core functions from the beginning. Now Finnish Literature Society is a private memory organization with 5 main functions, the archives being the largest. The archives acquire significant part of the material via theme-based collection campaigns, calling people to write about their memories, reactions, and experiences of a particular topic. Organizing a campaign usually starts with an impulse from a collaborator who is most often a researcher who needs material for his or her research, but sometimes we may launch a campaign by ourselves. When choosing what to collect, we want to respond to the needs of the research, but at the same time, we are hoping to present a reflection of the world we live in today for the future researchers to grasp. That's why the themes around current events and phenomena and the matters with social significance are usually the most welcomed ones. We have a network of 450 contributors of different ages and professions from all over Finland, to whom we mail the invitations twice a year. We also promote the campaigns through social media and press. One can participate by filling a form in our website, sending email or traditional mail using pen and paper. We ask for a consent for the sent material to be archived under one's name or pen name. Normally, we start planning a campaign months before the launch. However, when COVID-19 epidemic emerged as a daily topic in the news and social media, we had to react quickly. In just a few days, we were able to plan and launch the Koronakevät, the Corona Spring collection campaign. Our fast start resulted in early responses from the first days that the government regulations were in place. By the second week of September 2020, a total of 340 Finns had shared their experiences of their daily lives in the midst of the pandemic. The material received varies from jokes and short testimonies to diaries nearly 200 pages long. None of the 50 responses, which could be classified as diaries, is a COVID patient diary. For many, a diary as a form can be more approachable and more familiar than a testimony kind of a response that we usually get. It can offer an easier way to sort out one's feelings in less edited and less refined way, in which even repetition is allowed. Among the diaries received, the structure of the documentation varies. Some diaries may consist of long, deeply personal daily entries, whereas some don't have much more than latest COVID news and figures. One of the respondents had documented her thoughts and activities hour by hour for one day. As with all of our campaigns, Koronakevät was open to everyone. We received responses from lower grade students to senior citizens, from artists to academics. A few teachers also utilized the campaign for educational purposes. Almost 100 of the respondents were born in the first decade of the 21st century. This is really remarkable, I must note, because usually we get hardly any responses from young people. So also many teachers contributed their own experiences and observations to the collection. The material shows how the crisis is handled with great rationality, but it also reveals a vast display of emotions. The respondents express deep concern for their loved ones and anxiety due to the uncertainty and financial distress. Disappointment and anger are by no means absent in the material, which shows, for example, that for a single or an active elderly person, isolation can be especially hard when all the meaningful things in life, such as hobbies and social contacts, are suddenly out of reach. In texts, the omnipresent threat of a common enemy appears as an increased sense of community and responsibility, but also as a critical self-examination to consider one's values and actions. In my opinion, the significance of the material lies in demonstrating how we vary in our needs and ways of experiencing a crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic may in some way touch almost everybody, but the personal premises and reactions are definitely not identical. The material offers a welcome insight to deepest feelings and thoughts of the Finns trying to cope between daily duties and government regulations during the pandemic. In the situation, which is new to everyone, including the decision makers, it's no wonder that feelings of confusion, guilt, shame, and doubt are shared by many. We were not planning to launch a new campaign, but since the pandemic persisted and public debate grew more and more heated, we felt we didn't have any other option but starting the collection again in the anniversary of the previous campaign. So far, the Koko vuosi korona, a year with Corona collection has not been a success. It's possible, if not likely, that people have grown tired of the theme and would rather think anything else but COVID-related issues. However, no matter what the final quantitative outcome will be, it is important to be able to document the different phases of the pandemic. And there are only some of the questions we were asking in our questionnaire. The significance of this campaign is undeniable, indeed. For the contributor, writing can provide an important therapeutic means to deal with a confusing and unpleasant situation. Our archives, on the other hand, received a comprehensive collection of material of everyday descriptions of life in exceptional circumstances. Our archive collections are open for everyone, not only for academics. The previous collection campaign materials have been used as a source for dissertations and postdoc studies, but also for fiction, learning material for schools, and an augmented reality-based game. The Koronakevät material has already been found by researchers being one of our most sought-after materials during the past 6 months. No doubt, the diverse documentation collected offers valuable data and insight behind the statistics for researchers in many fields, now and in the future. And in the end, I would like to share with you an example of a positive pandemic outcome. This is a diary entry of a school teacher on a graduation day. What an exhilarating once-in-a-lifetime feeling. No need to do my hair, iron my skirt, or wear itching tights. Absolutely perfect for a person like me who hates all kinds of parties. Just fantastic to participate in the graduation ceremony in teams wearing a wrinkled dress, my camera turned off. No need to stress about any kind of maneuvers. Nothing laborious, but one can just relax and celebrate the upcoming vacation. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Marja-Leena. That was a very interesting presentation. And I have the feeling that you managed much better than I did to give a good overview of your collection or the pandemic collecting. It was interesting really for me to the remarks that you made, that you said that diary is as such is seen by people as an easily accessible means of writing about their life experience, because we did not think of that when we issued that. We just thought that this would be, like an interesting for a change, or we are in this situation that it demands this kind of thing. But I think that there's a very important point there, that it doesn't set so high demands, as you said, that you can repeat yourself and you can talk about trivial matters, and you can also there were some authors, especially men, who gave us just chronicle from the news, as you said, that so this, but this is also okay because there's no one way to do it. And I had never thought about of it like this. And also for me it was very interesting somehow. I have looked at this a little bit, but maybe not with full focus. That is important for me, this question of values, how it makes people think about their life values. And I think this is a really, this is a big topic, and I think it would deserve also this like a comparative, maybe Nordic Baltic research. So it was all really interesting for me, but this especially these notes, and also I think also in terms of the call, the chance call that is on digital technology and changes in society, that your example, the last example that you gave, was about how technology enables something, or like the positive side of technology. And I'm sure there are a lot of examples on the opposite, that you feel that everything is so clumsy and time consuming and frustrating with the help of technology. But that was a really like a lovely and kind of very everyday example of the opposite. I don't know if I have if I have time of a few more questions and comments. Perhaps we very quick comments or questions, I think, because it's much nicer if you have actually some discussion. I don't know. So, what do you think, Sanita? Can we, or if does someone have a question or a comment?
Well, we can move on and have a longer discussion at the end of the workshop. But if anyone has a question after the presentations, you are really welcome to ask or write on chat or kind of. Okay, sorry, I'm so sorry that I kind of misused my rights as a moderator. I already asked some questions. That's okay. But in that case, it is a pleasure to give floor to Audun Kjus, who is from Norwegian Folk Museum, and perhaps you can also say a few words about your work. So welcome, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Well, I work as a researcher, a cultural historian at the Norwegian Museum of Cultural History, and documentation, ethnographic work is part of what I do. And I'll just go into it actually. If you want to find out more about me, I'm sure you will find me on the internet. Let's see. Yes. I'll talk about our collection efforts and the collections that have resulted from them. And I'll make a few points about the experiences that we have made concerning the ethnographic strategies. And I'll mention some of our further plans. I'll not go into content at this stage because I think 15 minutes will not allow for that. But maybe later, on a later stage, we may meet again and also discuss contents. And you will recognize there's a pattern, certainly, in the ways that these initiatives have been running, but also you will see some variations, I think. But our initial project, we went live with it on the 20th of March. We had our press release for it on the 24th of March, and it was picked up at one of the major research journals, and they made a really good case on it, which led to a lot of radio and also television. And it gave this campaign a flying start. Also, we quite early established a cooperation with an oral history organization called Memoir, and they do video interviews. And this has had a great impact on our collection efforts because they contain a good mixture of writing, live writing, and also face-to-face interviews and mostly internet interviews. And that has been a really, I'll get back to that. on our first campaign in the spring, we focused on 4 different topics that we elaborated with supportive questions. And our direction into this was that this is something that has greatly altered the everyday life. So how has this influenced your everyday life? And we moved from there to more, how do you view society and politics at this stage, and what do you think about the future, and such questions. All our collection efforts have they're circling around this collection platform that we have been working with developing the last 5 years or something. It's called minner.no. It's memories. And this platform is built, these are sort of the principles for this platform, that the contributor owns his or her material, while we facilitate for sharing it with society and posterity. And this means that if you send away something, you can also erase it later if you want to. And practically nobody do that, but I think the principle is really important. And the contributor will have to choose between publishing the material or sending it in, submitting it for research only. And then, in addition to that, the museum carries an editorial responsibility for what's published in our project. So we have to see that material that we publish is suitable for publication. So there are like 2 filters in the way between a submission and publication. The person submitting will have to push the publish button, and also the person in charge of the project will have to oversee all this and see that, well, this is fair and well to publish. And I'll also mention that this platform, it is a multi-institutional platform, so that there are several museums and archives involved in this, and pooling resources. Well, these are the 4 projects so far on Minne that are dedicated to Corona topics. So in the bottom right corner, it's the one that we issued in March, and it covers mostly spring and summer. And after that, it sort of ebbed out. In addition, we had a special collection about the National Day celebrations that is in the mid-May, and they were very different than they normally would have been, and that several museums participated in disseminating and doing that special topic. And then we have another special topic. It's net interview based project. I was contacted by 2 freelancers, and they did some 20 interviews with rheumatics, people with rheumatic diseases, and how they have experienced the corona pandemics, because they cannot travel to warmer countries to have their illness soothed. And then we have our follow-up general collection. We did that in January, and that covers the fall of 2020 and the winter of the following winter. And well, the contents of these different projects, it's very variable. Our initial project, it has some 650 I call it organic responses, like this stuff that people have sent us just following our general call. And 210 of these are research only, been submitted only for research. And then in late in April, I decided to try an ethnographic experiment. I contacted 25, I think about 25 people who had written already good answers, and I asked them if they wanted to write diaries for the museum. And I had 10 successful answers to that, and they wrote weekly diaries for me during, I think it lasted until the end of June. And that's a very, while these organic responses, they're very variable, like some are very short and some are several pages long, but these diaries, they have thick material, and some of them also extensive photography. And I ended this campaign period with making video interviews with the people who have written journals, net interviews or face-to-face interviews. That part of summer we could actually do some face-to-face interviews, and one I didn't interview because she was giving birth at that time, but I'm going to catch up with her later. And in addition to that, we have about 100 video interviews done by this organization Memoir, and they have been, some of that material is more targeted because they then have thought about who should we hear more from? Well, people in the taxi drivers, we haven't heard from them. We need to interview some taxi drivers, more like that. Or we haven't really heard so much from young people, not originally born in Norway. We have to get more of those. And the points E and F, I think they're really interesting because they show independent freelancers, journalists, or all documentary film creators. They have made their own projects with this platform as a part of their project concept, so that they have gotten support from well, places that they can apply for support, and they've done special interview projects like this by Hedvig Idås. It's about nurses. She has interviewed nurses working with intensive care, corona care, and it's unique material, but she couldn't possibly, she didn't have a system for safekeeping this for the future, so it has become a part of our corona project. And this other, Siv Seglem, she made a project about very young school children, and then she, with cooperation with their parents, she interviewed and made a photo documentary of very young school children. And I think because we established ourselves on this field on an early stage, we became sort of a place you could go to with your material and get it a part of an official Corona archive. Well, this National Day Special Collection, it's not a great success. It got 150 responses of different kinds. And our second general COVID-19 and everyday life effort, it has got about 70 organic responses, and 32 of them are submitted for research only. And as has been already mentioned, it's considerably harder to get people involved in this sort of documentation now, but it's not impossible. And I think these 70 responses, they add also a lot of value to the 650 original responses, because if we haven't done this follow-up, then we would have had basically a documentation of the spring of 2020, which is really interesting, but only a small part of the pandemic experience. And we have two more like special efforts, video interview projects coming up. And one is about sailors and travel restrictions, and the other is about giving birth during COVID-19. So now I'll just give some reflections about what I've learned, because this all, it's sort of, I have been trying to invent things as we go along, sort of, and one initiative has been followed by the other, and it has not really followed, we couldn't have a plan for this, but it has been a very, I think I learned a lot by this experience. And one of these experiences is that our initial collection project, it became a part of this first crisis communitas that you could see in several ways in the spring. But in our materials, you can see that people, they send us also artistic expressions that reflect how they feel, or a perspective on the situation right now. And these 4 pictures that I have here, they're answers like that, because they're not, there's no, they don't use the form like we intended. They don't write answers to the questions. They send us this picture and some information, and this is a place to keep it and publish it, and we made this promise that we will safe keep this for the future. So and also music. I don't know if the sound will get through. Do you hear the sound? No. Well, these are also artistic expressions of very different genres, and they used our collection platform to post their COVID-19 music projects. Experience number 2, this is the summer that I went into net interviewing, and that's a great method. I don't like net meetings or net seminars that much, and you should perhaps think that net interviewing would be a bit like that, but it's not. I think this is an ethnographic method that has its clear values also in a non-pandemic situation. This one-to-one net interview situation, it works really nice. Yep, and I already mentioned how our projects has become repository for many freelance projects, and I made a count. I found that as many as 7 freelancers have created work for themselves doing ethnographic work with our platform as part of their concept. Also, as a consequence of all these sound interviews that we started making, we made the plan to make a podcast series, and this spring we have our active collection work has also been around the topics that we make podcast episodes on. And podcasts, it's also a new format for me, but it's also a way to keep our collection efforts alive through the pandemics. And I think that we're going to use this podcast series also after the pandemics to keep collecting people's Corona experiences, because it shows the value in a very concrete way. That this is worth collecting and it's worth sharing. Yeah. This is more to the I have been doing this work pretty much on my own. There hasn't been any more personnel dedicated to this at the museum, and also I haven't been able to do this full time. I have many other projects that I couldn't simply let go only because of the pandemics. But I think with more manpower, I think the collections that could have been made would have, like, it wouldn't be hard with some more manpower to create even more valuable, more varied, and more interesting collections. And one path would be just to follow up more from these 650 initial responses, to follow up on people who showed us some positive interest, and ask people to write diaries, send photographs, and also follow up with the video interviews. It's a sort of the path that I began the summer of 2020, and if we had like 5 people working with it, it would have been a tremendous collection. How are we on time? I haven't followed the clock at all, actually.
Well, you have one 6 experiences. You have one left. I think you can still talk about it.
Yeah.
And wrap it up.
Yeah, and this is also this is something we need to break down and get our heads around, because my experience now is that the media houses, they're not very helpful with the spreading the information about our efforts. They're not very cooperative. It's easy to get access to radio, but it's hard to get access to printed media or net media. And the reason for this, I think you can see in this picture. Because for the media houses, they want these personal stories in their web pages to attract the traffic on their web pages to sell advertises. That's how they live. That's how they make their living. And they don't really get the difference between how we treat everyday life oral history interviews and how they do it. They don't necessarily see the value of keeping this as a more raw sources to people's experiences and their ways of expression. They see us as competition, and if they see that we do something clever, they will copy it, and they won't necessarily ask us to cooperate, or if we, yeah. So I think spreading information, getting out with information about what we do, has the internet information situation hasn't made this at this stage. It's not very easy, I think, to get out there with information. Yeah, so that's why we need to cooperate more.
Thank you very much. And yet again, you put on the table like a range of new issues, but not so much that they would be new, that this would be something that we wouldn't have to deal with or experience with, or not, maybe not exactly the same way, but because of the focus of your presentation. And I think that is all very important, and hopefully we can then, as Sanita has suggested, that we have a discussion at the end. And also I think it would be really important to discuss this also. And then the question also, I think that is probably important for everyone, is the manpower that you need and how much manpower you have, and if together cooperating we could do something extra and like get some extra results, even though we are each working in our kind of a particular cultural sphere. Okay, but thank you very much, and I'd like to give the floor now to Susanne Nylund Skog, and she is from the Department of Ethnology and Folklore of Uppsala University. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because you have, when I checked what your background was, you had several affiliations. So you're free to add extra affiliations and.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. It's been very interesting to listen to all of you, and I see a lot of similarities and a few differences. So I am going to share now, and then I can concentrate on. Just let me do this. Okay, so I am a researcher at the Institute for Language and Folklore, although I have been working at both Uppsala University and Stockholm University, which might be confusing. And the Institute for Language and Folklore is a government agency dedicated for language in all its forms and for folklore. A part of the mission for the Institute is that we are dedicated not only to preserve old folklore collections, but also to create and generate new ones. And this we do, as some of you have explained from your different workplaces. We do this within research projects, and a big part is also collected on the internet with the questionnaires. Okay, so during since the pandemic started, we've had several projects going on, collecting different materials at the Institute. And we have this site that you see here now that goes tell us, and it could be on several different subjects. But I'm going to talk about two of these documentation efforts that we've had recently, and relate them to this theme of pandemic life writing of this seminar. The first of these is a questionnaire that concerning the coronavirus and its impact on everyday life in Sweden, which is with the aim of collecting stories about how people in Sweden are experiencing the ongoing epidemic. This questionnaire was placed on the internet last March, as many of yours also were, and it's still open for participants. And the second one that I would like to mention is a Christmas and New Year's diaries, and that we had a request, an open call during this last Christmas and New Year. I will briefly discuss the two and concentrate a little bit more on the diaries, and conclude with a comparison between the material gained. Let me see. The corona virus and its impact on everyday life, as I said, was placed on Mars, and by November we had 260 answers. And the questions concerned how daily life and routine had been affected, from where the people who answered the questionnaire had received information about the virus and their views on this information, and general reflections in regard to the changed situation. There were many more questions than these, but these were the main themes. The Christmas and New Year diaries, on the other hand, resulted in 70 diaries from all over the country. It were mainly, as with the first questionnaire, there were mainly women answering, and in the case of the diaries, mainly women older or above 50 years of age, although there were a lot of young people also. And they described they had been suggested topics for them, and the topics were, as you see here, what they did during Christmas and New Year, whom they met and had been in contact with, what they ate, drank, read, seen or listened to, and what they had refrained from doing, and what they had enjoyed, what worried them, and what they dreamed of for the future. There were three aspects of the Christmas celebrations that stand out in the diaries. These are some pictures we've got from the ones who wrote the diaries. Firstly, it was that Christmas is demarcated in time and space, not surprisingly though, but there were different ways of demarcating Christmas celebrations. And secondly, the importance of food and decorations, such as the Christmas tree. And thirdly, the social community and feelings it created. In the diaries, Christmas composed of cooking, decorating, and social interaction with relatives is depicted. The diary writer shows, I think, a great creativity and ingenuity when it comes to withholding and recreating traditions, while at the same time creating possibilities for meetings and social interaction despite the special circumstances during the corona epidemic. Whether this will continue after the corona, we will not know until it's all over. Although the same theme of maintaining and acknowledging the importance of relationships to relatives and friends is present in the answers on the questionnaire, they lack the affectionate and emotional setting that the diaries have. In the diaries, crisis caused by other things than the corona epidemic is also described, such as cancer, death of relatives prior to the corona, and depressions. That does not seem to be the case with the answers on the questionnaire. I have not read them all though. There are also more detailed description and narratives in the diaries, as well as a less amount of what I would define as some general and conclusive opinions in regard to the special situation due to corona. In other words, it seems as if the framework of the diary and the demarcated time span, in this case Christmas and New Year, created different material than the questionnaire did. This I find interesting, and I will point to some possible reasons for this. Firstly, I'm sure it depends on the participants' expectations. The call for diaries signaled to the participants that what was requested from them was a somewhat personal account of their life during the corona-restricted Christmas and New Year. The persons that contributed to the questionnaire, on the other hand, probably expected specific and clear questions concerning everyday life in general during the pandemic. There is also the difference in time spans. The answers to the questionnaire does not only cover a much greater period of time, the corona epidemic in its whole. The contributions were made during a period of 8 months. And since the information and restrictions regarding corona has changed considerably during this time, also the answers has, as you all previous speakers also pointed to. The last question in the questionnaire is, what is important to you right now? The change in answers over time to this question illustrate my point. In March 2020, the answers to this question mainly concerned information about corona and what would happen if workplaces and schools were to close, as well as how long the pandemic would go on. By October, the same year, the answers to this question had changed, now focusing more on emotions and endurance. In very generalized terms, I would argue that the answers to the questionnaire are concentrated on opinions of corona, the restrictions and their consequences, while the diaries contain personal descriptions of life under special circumstances created by the corona epidemic. Despite the specific questions, the answers to the questionnaire are also more varied than the diaries, as well as more demanding to work with. And the answers needs to be related to the time the answers were made, of course, to whom answered the questions, of course, the questionnaire itself, as is customary, as well as the surrounding society and several other related concepts that are actualized by the questions and the questionnaire. The diaries, on the other hand, does carry their own context within, so to speak. However, this does not mean that the diaries do not need to be related to other contexts and circumstances. Only that the genre of the diary in itself and the ritual celebrations of Christmas and New Year points out some relevant themes, time spans, and intertextual connotations. In conclusion, if the aim is to collect and archive pandemic life writing, the documentation efforts benefits, I think, from being restricted to a specific time frame. In this case, a yearly ritual. It could also be an event or, for example, a day. This enables the participants to describe and tell about their own experiences in ways that proves valuable, I think, for research on life writing now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susanne. And well, in Estonia, we have a very, kind of among people who work in the literary museum, in the life story archive, and who pursue this, who come from the background of mostly literary studies. So we have we kind of take for granted certain way of how we collect life stories, and so it's really interesting to see that there are many different ways how you collect pandemic life narratives, and also that we are so used to that you just ask, and people mostly there are questions, but usually they don't follow, so you have to handle whatever is there anyway, kind of make your way through this mass of different kinds of records and formats and so on. So you have more also for me that seems like an ethnographer's perspective, that you say that you can I don't know, arrange it so that you have a more a systematic way of getting the answers in the first place. So this is something that we very rarely have, because Estonian tradition, that is a strong tradition, is simply so different. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, but again, it's really interesting how different these different experiences, how there are similar points to them, and also that these, or the overall knowledge about how to collect what you can have, how to continue what is needed, how it keeps growing with each presentation in the seminar. I think it's just fantastic. And so I would like to give floor to the last presenters, and they are from Latvian Institute of Literature and Folklore. And I don't know if you will be presenting all three but the authors of the presentation are Sanita Reinsone and Ilze Ļaksa-Timinska and Justīne Jaudzema. I don't know if I pronounced the names right. Probably I didn't. But please then correct me. And the floor is yours. And it is the project is affiliated with Latvian Institute of Literature and Folklore. So they are the kind of they called this event, and so kind of together they organized the event. So this, yeah. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Leena, and thank you all for sharing these wonderful experiences. I already thought that so many things are different from what you told and your observations on the content and so on. Today, I will be the speaker, but this project is carried out in general by 3 of us, as we did all the main work in collecting the pandemic diary since the March. So this presentation is also available in Google Slides openly. So if you maybe it's easier for you to look at your own screens, then you're welcome to use the link. And yeah, me too. I will not deal so much with the content because it's the collecting has been so intense that, in fact, we know, of course, what people write about, but it takes time to analyze all this collected material. So I will focus more on creating this collection, or way how we dealt with that. And the context is autobiography collection, which is a special collection at the Archives of Latvian Folklore, and it's relatively new. We established this only in 2018 to provide a space and place where written diaries, written life stories, written memories, letters are archived, and also other material connected to that. This is also a digital archive. And we use the digital archive of Latvian Archives of Latvian Folklore. So this is the one storage available at garamantas.lv. And you see in this example that there's a life story, there are images of an author, some life description of his or hers, and some other material. So that's kind of background where this pandemic diary collection is kept and stored. Yeah, pandemic was quite a surprise for us, as for all of us, I guess, and we also had to react very quickly. I think it was only some 4 or 5 days when what we spent in planning all this campaign, and we carried it out with an online journal, Punctum, which published in Latvian, and it's connected to culture, philosophy, and literature. And we launched this campaign on March 17. That was the first call, and you can see the 2 posters. The first poster was used for the first wave from March till, I don't know, end of May, beginning of June. And the other one, the more colorful one, was used for a call that was launched at the end of August or beginning of September. This is a digital collection of pandemic diaries, and we went on with the idea that it will be open to public. It will be dynamically archived and accessible almost at the same day or the next day when the material is submitted. But we offered authors to not to use their real names if they would like to be anonymous. So here's a little bit about communication, how we communicated this this initiative. So first of all, these are cooperation partners. We made joint calls, joint press releases. They even took care about that mostly. And through these cooperation partners, we also managed to attract their audience, their readers. But differently from what Audun said, we received quite a fantastic support from mass media. We had numerous interviews on national TV and radio. And remembering the March 2020, it seems me like I remembered it like being always on some TV or radio speaking about that, encouraging that, sharing the first results and so on. Also, commerce CVs were interested and interviewed us, and we shared some stories for their news. Also, national newspapers and regional newspapers published calls for participation. We created a press releases that was disseminated across the country. I do not know if we counted how many newspapers published these calls, but we tried to get outside this bubble of ours by reaching people in the countryside and so. And of course, news and culture portals, online portals also were supportive in publishing calls for participation. We used also social networks for encouraging, again, publishing calls for participation, giving updates, how many diaries have been submitted, and highlighting some content, thanking people for being part of this project. And also social networks was a space where we recruited authors. I mean, if we notice that someone is writing Facebook posts, diary like Facebook posts, we used this communication platform to invite them to contribute to the archive. So a little bit about collecting strategy and tools. We call this a dynamic digital archiving, as I said, and it asks a lot of efforts. And especially this first wave, we felt like working at some factory, or story factory or something like that, because a lot of work was spent in communicating and processing the material that was submitted. And again, cooperation partners are very helpful. They recruited authors who write one or more diary records that were published in these online journals. And afterwards, we had this agreement that we are archiving these online journal records in our collection. And this open approach, I mean that everyone can read what others write, I think it helped us in attracting other people. Well, we received a comment that yes, I felt the same, and I well, especially in the diaries, people also referring to other people's diaries they have read, and yeah, I have experienced something like that. I read the diary and so made some inner kind of intertextuality. We used email, of course, and Google Docs, which was the most used tool for sharing these diaries with us. And also, as I mentioned already, social networks and blogs. We introduced this tag, pandemic diary, or in Latvian, pandēmijas dienas grāmata, which we invited to use. So we get to know who is writing a pandemic diary on a network, and also to tag our Facebook page, which we saw as an expression of interest that people want their writing to be archived. But anyway, we contacted each author asking about, can we take your writing and archive it in pandemic diary collection, and so on. So about the results, you can see the link of this pandemic diary collection. And by yesterday, yeah, we got 237 contributors. It is quite surprising that so little chose to be anonymous. Most of them decided to publish with their own real names. You can see also the number of records. We started counting them each day, so we could produce a graph of writing intensity to share it on social networks, and so show how the project is going. Many records, as you see, were illustrated also by photos and drawings. And one more thing that we did when we archived these diaries, we annotated places mentioned in narratives, in written narratives, so to create this map of pandemic writings. I will show you later on how it looks like. And we were quite successful in annotating almost all places mentioned in these 237 diaries. And this graph reflects what you were talking about, that the first wave is very well documented, and people were very active, really very active in writing, while summer came with absolute silence. In that, we didn't encourage. Almost no articles were about to write a pandemic diary. And then you see the results of this second wave, autumn and spring, which keeps quite low, but it still is, activity is still ongoing. I do not know when and how will we end, but let's see. Yeah, this is also an interesting thing, and you already mentioned, some of you, that women are the authors. So this is also a case in our project. And in general, it reflects cultural consumption of Latvian society, that women are more active in that. And 81% of authors are women. And the other one, records per author, is also interesting picture in terms that you can see that almost half produced one diary record. Yeah, and that's it. But I'm glad that there are also those who keep writing regularly. There were not so many, but still we have diaries that were kept since the March up to today. And yeah, a little insight into collection. I think it is quite similar. It is quite similar into what you already seen. Most of them are kind of already computer readable text submitted either in Word or email messages or a social post. This was also our first attempt in archiving the Twitter diaries. Yeah, but there are also examples when, for example, this diary, which was partly written in English and partly drawn, which is very, very beautiful one. And also diaries that were photographed, written by hand. Photo was taken and sent to us, and we were either transcribing. I think we were transcribing them. Yeah. And as you can see, we tried to keep the original style of writing. I mean, emoji icons are the ones that we faced and that came into our collection for the first time, as people indeed use quite much of emoji icons to illustrate their writing additionally. What we did, we tried a little bit of topic analysis. This is preliminary results of this, and we calculated 10 topics, and you can see that the most of them deal with lifestyle. I mean, about work, travel, getting around, and so on. What is surprising, but maybe not, is that the topic related directly to COVID-19, I mean, COVID tests, temperature, mask, quarantine, you can see the topic 7, it has such a low relevance. It can be explained partly by the fact that the first wave was not so COVID-oriented. It was more like facing restrictions, dealing with the new situation, but the illness was not, the virus was not so spread, at least in Latvia. I do not remember already, but we have quite a few casualties. It couldn't be compared to what happens in the autumn, what happened in the autumn. And the autumn diaries are less than spring, so this topic is not very, very relevant. Sometimes I thought, and also reading social networks, that all pandemic thing is about home teaching and this family life being spent in a flat or house and so, but it seems that in the diaries it doesn't. There are diaries that deal with that, but it's not also so popular, as well as at least my bubble dealt very much with theater and films and books and performances, poetry and so on. But in the diaries, I also see that it is a topic highlighted, but not as of high relevance as I expected. And another thing, another thing you can see that the topic related to nature is quite finely represented in this corpus. People were going to woods, forests, enjoying spring more maybe than before. So yeah, but this is preliminary analysis, as I said, and maybe this division between topics is not that very correct. And so I mentioned the maps, and we annotated places that are mentioned in the text, and also if an author told us from where is he or she writing, we also annotated that place. And you can see that in general, our pandemic collection deal with whole world. And it was interesting to see at the beginning how this map moves. I mean, people were following numbers and how many people got virus in that country, and how from China the narratives followed to Italy, and then came closer and closer to Latvia, and finally, of course, Latvia is a one red point in that map. This is interesting, especially in combination with a timeline, to see what places people think about, where they go, and so. And we also create a pandemic map for each author. And I haven't compared all the other collection we have, but it seems to me that these pandemic narratives are quite a place-oriented. It is important to mention where you have been or what you have thought about and so on. And some of them are very local. For example, in the middle, on the lower row, you can see, if I'm not mistaken, a map of author who works as a vault courier. So she documents Riga mostly. Then there are authors who are documenting more global contexts, or Latvia, for example. You can see this item 15. It's very, very place-oriented diary, and so on. Yeah, this is another aspect which is really interesting, and these maps gives a lot of thought, and you can see some kind of a bit different insight into writing. Yeah, and the last thing, what are the main challenges? You already mentioned that, and I think it's it is a common problem or challenge, how to encourage to keep writing, how to keep this intensity, how to how to make a collection that documents evenly. Yeah, we haven't achieved that. And also we had this challenge of archiving of mixed social media material, and these dynamic social interactions. I mean, if we are archiving Facebook posts, it's only one part of social reality, because Facebook post contains also comments and sharing and likes or dislikes and comments, and we cannot take them because we have to make agreements with all comment authors and so on. Yeah, this is I think that this year was a year that we had ability to learn very much, and yeah, that's it.